What are the world's 7 natural wonders? Which ones would you pick? We've compiled a list of our top 7, from the suffocating heat of Death Valley, the awesome power of Niagara Falls and the Geysers of Yellowstone, to the mightiest river and the greatest canyon. For many of us, the natural world acts as a distant backdrop to our busy urban lives. We carve and cultivate vast areas of land to suit our own purposes and needs. But where nature remains untamed, we are forced to confront ourselves, compelled to look and listen. These wildernesses, tropical jungles, and desert canyons not only provide a window into the past, but they help remind us of our place on Earth. In the next 2 hours, we celebrate some of our most exquisite and precious natural sights. Our journey begins here, dawn over the Grand Canyon. This is one of the most dramatic landscapes on the planet, and it needs no introduction. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt said, "It is the most impressive piece of scenery I have ever looked at. It is beautiful and terrible and unearthly." This vast wound gouged out of the surface of the Earth lies in the northwest corner of Arizona. The dimensions of the canyon are breathtaking. It twists and turns 277 miles from Lake Mead in the west to Lee's Ferry in the east. At the south rim, it measures 1 mile deep and is anywhere between 8 and 16 miles wide.
Up in an airplane, you don't get the effect of how deep this thing really is.
I mean, it's gorgeous, especially when you work, and and then when you're on vacation, this is just great.
It's like looking down an elevator shaft.
When you walk up to this canyon for the very first time, you don't know exactly where you're supposed to be staring at or looking at. It's overwhelming. I think the most common thing that people say, and it's trite but it's true, is that photographs just don't prepare you for what you're going to experience.
Words really don't describe it. Pictures don't describe it. You've got to see it in person.
Four and a half million tourists visit the Grand Canyon each year. During the summer months, 20,000 come here every day. We photograph it, hike it, camp in it, and fly over it. Lon Ayers first came here in his mid-20s, and he's been returning ever since. He's now walked more of the Grand Canyon than anyone else alive today.
People ask me how many miles have I walked here at the canyon, and I really don't know the answer to that, but I've walked all the trails that go into the canyon, most of them many times. I've always sort of carried this personal goal of trying to walk the whole thing end to end, and it's a huge thing. It's almost 300 miles of length, and most of it involves trailless walking, and I've just sort of been chipping away at it over the years, and I find myself down to the last 40, 50 miles or so. There's certainly the potential here to walk for literally weeks at a time and never see so much as another footprint, let alone another human being. And that's kind of a rare thing in today's world.
Today, the Grand Canyon is embraced as a national icon, but for centuries, it was regarded as a formidable natural barrier. Native Americans, however, have lived and hunted in the canyon for at least 4,000 years. It wasn't until 1540 that the first white people saw it, when Spanish explorers in search of gold were taken to the edge of the South Rim by Hopi Indians.
We surmise, based on ancient roots as well as just logic, that they hit the rim somewhere down around Desert View, east of here. They stayed in the area 3 days, actually tried to climb down into the canyon, and absolutely underestimated the place in every sort of way. And keep in mind, these were not just tourists who piled out of the minivan here along the rim. They were hardened wilderness travelers, and even so, the place absolutely escaped them. It offers nature on a scale that sort of, I think, these early people found intimidating. Most of the early writings about the canyon do not center on the beauty at all. They talk about the incredible natural barrier the place presents to travel. It's just a question of them being products of their own time. You have to, I think, reach a certain level of affluence and comfort before you can really start to center in on the aesthetics of the place.
Today, city slickers play at being cowboys and experience the canyon the traditional way.
Experience of a lifetime for me. Great time. And the only way you can get views like this is on the back of these mules, because having that extra 5 feet between you and the ground to look down, it really adds a little bit of excitement to the whole trip. It's so immense and so vast, and the best place to see it is from down below.
We're doing this pretty much the same way it was done when Theodore Roosevelt did it, who of course was the one responsible for protecting the Grand Canyon in the first place. There's a lot of tradition and history in this mule ride. It takes about 5 hours to make it out with the tourist mules. There are some pack mules, which are the supply train for Phantom Ranch. They can make it out in about 3.5 hours, but they're not stopping and taking pictures. There are some dangers. We actually do have a real good safety record. We haven't had any fatalities ever, and we've been doing this for 95 years. Mules are naturally pretty sure-footed anyway. They have 4 feet for one thing, so if they trip on 1 foot, they've got 3 more feet to catch themselves.
Jim Heywood has been a park ranger at the Grand Canyon since 1983. What keeps him here is a passion for geology. In his own words, he is the ranger who rants, raves, and revels in rocks.
When I first came here almost 20 years ago, I realized that this is the canyon by which all of the canyons want to be measured. There are very few places on this earth that you can bring together the right combination of geological ingredients to produce this canyon. In fact, there's only one place. That's why it's here and nowhere else.
The Grand Canyon is the world's greatest geological showcase, but to understand how and when it was created requires a superhuman perception of time.
When you come to the Grand Canyon, you basically have to deal with more time than you can imagine. It's called geological time. The Earth today is considered to be about 4.6 billion years old. The oldest rock at the bottom of the canyon is almost 2 billion. The rock that we're on right now is approximately 275 million. When you look out at the Grand Canyon, it formed within the last 5 or 6 million years. Now, to most people, 5 or 6 million years is a lot of time, but in geology, it's nothing. This canyon literally formed overnight. It's really just quite simple that the Colorado River is the carver of the Grand Canyon. The river simply cuts down through the rock, the sides collapse in. The Grand Canyon of the planet Earth can only form where very little water comes out of the sky. And if there's one thing that really isolates this canyon, that makes it really special, is the reality that you need a desert, but you need a major river. And I asked the question, how many major desert rivers are there on this planet? And the answer is very, 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 very few.
Colorado River is a mighty waterway, and riding its rapids demands both skill and a healthy respect for Mother Nature. But to understand why the river carved the Grand Canyon, you have to go further back in time. By descending into the canyon and studying each layer of rock, a unique window is revealed into how the American Southwest was formed. What these rocks tell us is that millions of years before the canyon was created, this whole area was a vast coastal plain.
When you first learn about Grand Canyon's geological story, you can't help but to remember there are 3 chapters in the story. There's the creation of the rock, the recent uplifting of the rock, and the even more recent carving of the canyon. And for most of the story, we're talking about Grand Canyon, not as a big canyon with lots of rock, but a coastal plain with mud being dumped into it, sand being dumped into it, lime being deposited. And through time, geologists have identified stories that these rocks tell. As an example, right here, we can see a wonderful line that separates some red material from some whitish material. And what this line is apparently telling us is this. At one time, maybe going back about 270 million years, no Grand Canyon here. This was maybe a scaled down Arabian desert. And if you looked all around you from this point, it would have been one massive sea of sand. And this is what this is telling us, right? A massive sea of sand. And for whatever reasons, beginning about 270 million years ago, either sea level began to rise or the land began to drop or a combination thereof. And the sea gradually came into this area, planed off the top of the dunes right here, began to rework the sand, and what we're looking at here is sea bottom, maybe the bottom of something like the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea.
But today, this ancient seabed lies 7,000 feet above sea level. Over millions of years, the whole of this area was subjected to a process known as uplifting. Uplifting occurs when 2 continental plates collide. One plate is forced down and melted in the molten magma. This superheated rock creates intense pressure, forcing the other plate upwards. As the surface of the Earth lifted, the Colorado River began to cut through the layers of rock, and over 6 million years, the Grand Canyon was formed.
Go back about 5 or 6 million years, the airspace out there was rock. And in the last 5 or 6 million years, as the river cuts down and as the sides collapse in, the material that's gone from here is being dumped into the Gulf of California. So the Gulf of California is, in a sense, rock in the making. And we were rock in the making for several 100 million years here.
The Grand Canyon is truly an international sort of place. But the interesting thing to me that I've experienced anyway is how similar people react to what they're seeing out there. The reaction is almost universally one of awe, certainly a realization of how small and insignificant we human beings can be.
When we return, we get steamed up with the geysers of Yellowstone. Yellowstone, 3,472 square miles of untamed natural beauty, lying in the northwest corner of Wyoming. This is America's oldest national park and one of its most cherished natural wonders. It's as close as you can get to pure wilderness, raw and timeless. It's estimated that a third of the American population have visited Yellowstone, and they return year after year.
We get about 3 million people a year into Yellowstone. At this gate alone, on a busy summer day, we get close to 4,000 vehicles, and so it's very busy. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to Yellowstone. It's hard to get people through in a timely fashion and yet give them the information that they need. Most people don't encounter bison and grizzly bears in their day-to-day lives, so there are some things that people need to be prepared for. I've had people ask me, is it safe to get out of my car? Well, of course, it's safe. I mean, it's probably safer than getting out of your car in the city.
150 years ago, few ventured here. It was wild and dangerous, but those that did returned with claims of a land where hell bubbled up. But in 1871, the U.S. Geological Survey led an expedition across Yellowstone to investigate. Part of the team was photographer William Henry Jackson. Jackson's photographs were enough to convince Congress to pass a bill to preserve the land for posterity. Yellowstone became the world's first national park, and it's been providing spiritual renewal for the American public ever since.
The terrain here is so incredibly rugged and beautiful, it just knocks you over the head. You're just stunned by the beauty. We have large mammals here that you don't see in this kind of setting anywhere else, the way the West used to be. So I think the purity of nature and being what it is in its natural state draws people, whether they know it or not. It renews them, brings them a reason to live, to get away from all that ugliness and do something pure and natural for a while. That's the best I can explain.
It's the role of park rangers like Julie Hannaford to control the summer invasion and preserve and protect the public, as well as the environment.
Hi, it's just a reminder to you, and you probably already know this. Dogs and bears have a really bad relationship, and I'd hate for him to be tied up and have a bear come through the campground if nothing else.
Okay.
There is an inherent risk to coming here, and people forget that. They do come for the big draw of it being wild in the West and the animals, and they seem to somehow not quite make the connection that that means we can't regulate all of that. And they forget the risks that are inherent of being here. The bison are much more prevalent in the park, and again, they tend to have that docile appearance. People think of them as being like cattle because they sort of look like cattle. They graze and do the cattle thing, and people tend to approach them more than any of the other animals they have here. They have the ability because there's more of them. They're close to the road because the road runs down the corridors where the bison live. And again, they have that draw. They're warm and fuzzy, and they're out there grazing, and you want to touch them. So we do tend to have at least a couple bison gorings. When that happens, we tend to sometimes get a response from the visitors that somehow we have failed in protecting them. And so it's obvious that for some people, not all, some people, they've not made the connection that wild truly means wild.
And that doesn't just refer to the animals. Yellowstone positively hisses and bubbles with geothermal activity. The park is a supervolcano. Just beneath the Earth's surface here lies a hotspot of molten magma that acts like a giant blowtorch, heating and blistering the entire area. It's a phenomenon that has intrigued scientists like Hank Hessler for decades.
Supervolcano in the common sense definition means it's active and it's big. And definitely Yellowstone is one of the world's largest active volcanoes. In fact, it's so large that many people who visit here don't realize they're in it. We had a massive volcanic eruption in this area 2.1 million years ago, then another one about 1.3 million years ago, and then the most recent massive eruption was 640,000 years ago. Was that the end of the volcanic activity? Well, obviously not.
The park boasts over 10,000 geothermal features, everything from geysers and hot springs to mud pools.
A geyser is a very controlled, what we call hydrothermal explosion. The water gets very, very hot, above boiling temperature in the plumbing system of a geyser. And then there's a constriction in that plumbing system that allows pressure to build up. Eventually, the geyser kind of burps, lets off a little bit of water that has been constraining all the pressure in it, and when it does that little bit of burp, suddenly it relieves the water pressure and it forces the remaining steam and water out of the plumbing system, and that's why we have the eruptions.
Whether this supervolcano will erupt again is subject to fierce debate.
There's a lot of geologic arm waving about this is happening, that's happening, and the scientists, as good scientists do, are intensely debating what's going on. There is a hot spot here. Now the question is, what exactly is the nature of the hot spot in Yellowstone? And I would say let's stay tuned for another 10 or 20 years and maybe that can be answered. They're very attractive, yet they are very, very deadly. More people have been killed in thermal features in Yellowstone than by bears, because when I check a temperature, I always use this instrument. Many people use this instrument, and it is very unwise to stick your finger into boiling battery acid. So the beauty is here, but also the danger is right alongside of that. Beauty and the beast in the same pool. A very deadly area, but very attractive and almost alluring.
For some, that allure can become an obsession. Geyser gazers, as they're known, will travel far and wide to see one erupt.
Yeah, it was on the 11th, and then Giantess was on the 16th.
We like seeing the animals, but it's the geysers. Everyone is different. They're as unique as people.
And you just get hooked on it.
The famous quote is, it's definitely probably going to erupt.
Grand's pool's looking very good. Anybody in the vicinity, come to Grand in the next few minutes.
Grand is great because you're pretty much guaranteed you can wait there a couple of hours and see a really nice show.
David left here.
My first trip here was in 1966, and it was a revelation. I've been coming back essentially every year since then. Something about it just catches our fancy. I just was intrigued partly because originally I wanted to figure out when the next eruption was so I could see it, and then you begin to, being a technical sort of person, I keep wondering what's going on down there. That's the question, the puzzle. Why do these things happen the way they happen?
Ralph Taylor was so intrigued he signed up as a volunteer park ranger and now spends every summer employed as Yellowstone's geyser cleaner.
What I'm doing is cleaning out the debris and the litter that is left around the geyser basins. The debris is mostly cigarette butts, chewing gum, papers, sometimes the odd hat and the map on a windy day. And then there's the intentionally introduced things, coins and rocks and sticks that people throw just for whatever reason. Those are the ones that probably do the most damage. There was a case where somebody actually pounded a 3-inch diameter log into Vixen Geyser and stopped it erupting. It was very difficult to get out. That was clearly deliberate vandalism of the geyser. If I had a guess, I'd say people kind of expect that if they pound a log in there, it's going to be fired out like a cannon, but it won't. These are some coins that I collected this summer from various hot springs. Some, as you see, are barely tarnished at all. Ones that have been there a little longer sometimes turn dark. Over a summer, I may get as many as 1,500 coins. Things like coins are such that they attract more attention, and if we leave a few, next week there'll be 100. It's kind of offensive. I think it disrespects the park, because people had the foresight almost 130 years ago to set this aside so we could all enjoy it. And it's our responsibility to maintain it in a pristine condition as possible.
As the numbers visiting the park mount each year, they place an increasing burden on the environment. And the question on everyone's lips is whether Yellowstone is being loved to death.
The animals, the plants, everything we have here that's a resource for us, you can only do so much before you eliminate whatever that is. The animals will tolerate a certain amount of people, and then you start changing their behavior because there's too many people there. You can walk on the plants only so many times before the plants aren't going to grow there anymore. So in a way, it's been overused to a certain degree where you've lost some of the things that were inherently here to begin with. But we do have a mission or mandate where we are required to let people come in so that they can actually see these things. So it's our job to try to reach a balance. And that's hard because everyone has their own opinion on what's too much and what isn't. That's a hard decision to make. And I'm glad it's not me, because this is America's national park. They have a right to come here, and we want them to.
Up next, we travel to the hottest place in the world. Death Valley, a natural wonder that is as mysterious as it is extreme. With temperatures reaching over 130 degrees Fahrenheit, this is, on average, the hottest place in the world, and it revels in its notoriety. There is Dead Man Pass, Funeral Mountain, and Arsenic Spring. Death Valley lies just east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. It is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, descending 282 feet below sea level. Covering over 5,000 square miles, it is one of the largest national parks in the United States.
Death Valley is huge, and in the 6 years I've been here, I haven't seen half this park. and I could be here for another 6 years and probably won't see many of the areas. The other thing is its diversity. This place has got such a variety of plant life, animal life. The geology is a geologist's dream come true. It's an open textbook.
Despite its awesome reputation, Death Valley is a place of captivating beauty.
Death Valley is a gorgeous place, but it's also one that you must visit with a great deal of respect. The heat is a killer. Our evaporation rate in Death Valley is extreme. We get about 1.9 inches of rain in a year's time. But our evaporation rate is 150 inches a year. So you can just imagine if you were to put out a bucket of water or just stand still out here, your body is just going to be wicking moisture out very, very fast.
Since 1911, temperatures here have been recorded twice daily for the Weather Bureau. Park Ranger Charlie Callahan is the local amateur meteorologist.
Well, every morning around 8 o'clock in the morning, we come out here and take the official temperature reading. I check the current temperature and get everything set in there. Then I come out here and check the temperature in the evaporation pond. I check a high temperature and a low temperature. On average, it's definitely the hottest in North America and generally the hottest in the world. Our average temperature in the month of July is 115 degrees, and this year we've been above average almost every day of the month so far. We've had more than a dozen days over 120 degrees in the month of July this year.
The hottest temperature ever recorded in Death Valley occurred in 1913, 134 degrees Fahrenheit.
1913, the temperatures were being recorded just about a half-mile south of here at the Greenland Ranch, as Furnace Creek was called in the day. And Oscar Denton was the caretaker of the Greenland Ranch. And he went out that day and he said it was so hot that the swallows were falling in flight onto the ground. He had wrapped a Turkish towel around his head that was real wet, went out and took the recording, and before he got back, that wet towel had already dried out. At those temperatures, it can be deadly if you go out unprepared. I mean, most of our visitors were telling, don't go hiking unless it's 5:30, 6:30 in the morning. And if somebody tries something too adventuresome, it can be fatal. And I mean, we actually found that out today. We had someone who didn't survive a extreme hike that they planned from the valley floor of Death Valley all the way to the highest point, Telescope Peak. And we think they made it to the top, but they definitely didn't make it back alive to their vehicle, and very unfortunate.
But there are those who go out of their way to flirt with death. Once a year, endurance runners pit themselves against the elements and compete in the ultimate physical challenge, the Badwater Ultra Marathon.
This is the world's toughest running race. They're going to run 135 miles from right here, which is Badwater in Death Valley, to Mount Whitney, which is 2 mountain ranges away. The temperatures will be in the 125, 130 range. A lot of them train in a sauna, running on a treadmill or pedaling a stationary bike in a sauna for several hours a day.
It's an intriguing race to me. It's very challenging. It's the heat, the environment. It's just incredible. It's like you in the desert here.
It's probably the ultimate challenge, and I've done other things, but this is sort of the biggest and the baddest of all the races.
So mentally, I run this race in segments. If you do the whole thing, you try to run the whole thing in your mind, it's overwhelming. It's just too much.
It is a race, but it's also a life-changing, transformational experience. We have people here from early 20s until nearly 70 years old. If they don't take proper care of themselves, they're going to melt down almost immediately, and I mean that almost literally. People have dropped out of this race in the first 10 miles.
Coming up, we explore Death Valley's greatest mystery. Death Valley is a place of the weird and the wonderful. In a far-flung corner of the park, a geologist and his students from Hampshire College, Massachusetts, have been studying a mystery that has baffled them for the last 15 years. On a dried lakebed, known as the Racetrack Playa, there is the riddle of the moving stones.
It's a place where, over long periods of geologic time, the rains have washed fine mud down into a basin which has no outlet. And as a result, the mud has simply collected here and become an incredibly flat surface. And right behind us here is a cliff of dolomite boulders that periodically fall and somehow make their way out onto this dance floor. And then a crazy phenomenon seems to happen. Every once in a while, the conditions are just right to have rocks like these two behind us slide around on this surface. We've surveyed the surface. It's as flat as anything you can possibly imagine. It's absolutely flat. So they're not sliding downhill, and it's been a mystery for 50 years, possibly quite a lot longer, as to how these things move. There are sort of two views, and both of them have as the motive force the wind. One is, and this is the one that I think is the most popular, it rains, the place gets wet and slippery, and the wind comes up, and the wind is so strong that it blows these things around, nothing else involved. There are a couple of difficulties with that. One is that the wind speed is very dependent on how close you are to the ground, and the closer you are to the ground, the slower the wind. So that down near the ground, some of these rocks are very low profile rocks, the wind would have to be howling 500 plus miles an hour to move these things down at the ground level. If you stand where that one started, and the space that we are apart is, I don't know, what, 10 feet or something like this. This one had to move to probably about here by the time the two of them seem to have moved together, if they did. And doesn't it look to you guys as though this bend is longer, that this little straightaway here is longer than the one that one makes? It looks as though if they were in some chunk of ice, that chunk of ice must have spun at the end to do this. Our notion is that if it rains in the wintertime and then the sky clears and the night gets cold, you could lock all of these rocks into an enormous sheet of ice, maybe an inch thick, floating on the remaining water that hasn't yet frozen. Then, if the breeze begins, and it doesn't probably have to be a very big breeze because there's an enormous sail area to this piece of ice, the rocks do what the ice tells them to do, and they start to move around. But after that, it looks as though they went on their own little merry pathways because the ice was beginning to break up. I'd love to see it happen. It's never been watched, or to our knowledge, it's never been seen. It would also be quite fun to electronically, monitor the place. But actually, I think that's not a good idea. I think the greatest thing about this place is that even to us, we've been here 15 times studying this place, it's still a mystery. And if it came to be known by everybody that there was one process and everybody agreed to it, that'd be a sad thing.
100 years ago, the whole of Death Valley was a mystery. It was uncharted territory and left blank on maps. Those who ventured here did so at their own peril. Today, however, we cross the valley floor in the comfort of our four-wheel drive, air-conditioned vehicles. We even play golf here.
There is water in Death Valley. Even though we don't get much moisture in terms of rain and snow, a lot of folks look at that and say, oh, 1.9 inches, then it's really barren. But they're rather surprised to see a rather lush area around the Furnace Creek area of Death Valley with swimming pools, date farms, even a golf course. That water is spring water. And it's an underground aquifer that feeds basically from eastern Nevada and flows underground to Death Valley. Again, Death Valley is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, so water is pretty lazy. It's going to go to the lowest point, and that's where it eventually ends up. But there are hundreds of springs in Death Valley where water has hit a layer of rock, it can no longer flow underground, and pops to the surface.
And where there's water, there's life. One hardy desert dweller lives in a small chasm in the rock. It's so unexpected in this environment that there's a federal law to protect it. In a pool of water lying at the bottom of Devil's Hole exists a unique species of pupfish, but how they got there remains a mystery. Linda Manning has been studying the fish for the last 2 years.
Millions of years ago, geologists believed that this area was underwater, basically a series of lakes. And over time, as the climate became drier, the lakes receded. We believe that about 40,000 years ago, the ceiling collapsed over Devil's Hole. At that time, it's also believed that the water level was below the ground surface. The big question we have now is, if the water table was lower than the ceiling when it collapsed, how did the fish get here? And we had always assumed that this was just a population that as the lakes receded, the water dropped and the fish just sort of kind of landed here. Now we're not certain. We really don't know. The entire population, the entire species of the Devil's Hole pupfish is in this hole. They exist nowhere else on Earth. We think that there's about a 45% drop in population since the mid-90s, and that's raised a lot of concern for us. And so we are in the middle of a bioenergetic study. It's the first study that's really looking at Devil's Hole as an ecosystem. That's the purpose of these funnels here, is to determine what actually is falling into the hole.
Look, bats.
Nutrients that fall into the water include dead bats and insects.
The water level has been slowly dropping, and we now have a better understanding that this water is attached to a regional aquifer. So as the aquifer drops, the water is going to drop in here. That makes it much more complex of an issue to maintain the water level here in this hole. But it's essential, it's critical for the survival of this fish.
Despite its fearsome reputation, this is a place of entrancing beauty and extraordinary diversity. And for those who respect it, it is more a valley of life than a valley of death.
I'm asking myself what the meaning of life is, and I don't think it's this.
Next up, we come face to face with the fire goddess. Our journey continues here, Big Island of Hawaii, the southernmost landmass of an archipelago lying in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The creation of Hawaii is an extraordinary and dramatic tale. It is the story of the tempestuous fire goddess, Pele. It is a saga of life and death. Hawaii is located 2,400 miles off the west coast of the United States. There are 8 islands in the chain, but on the southeast coast of Big Island lies an area the size of New York City, known as Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. This World Heritage Site displays the results of 70 million years of volcanism, and if you're a lava lover, this is where you come.
Hawaii is unusual, if not unique, in that it has particularly large basaltic volcanoes over an oceanic hotspot. And the calderas here are as well developed as anywhere in the world. So here we are standing right on top of the world's most active volcano, and we feel pretty safe, I think, anyway.
It's creation that they will never, ever witness in their lives again. The creation of Earth is something dramatic.
Here stand two of the world's most impressive volcanoes. Mauna Loa, the long mountain, is a slumbering giant. It last erupted in 1984. This is the largest volcano in the world. It measures just over 10 miles from its base below the seafloor to its crater.
It rises an estimated 56,000 feet from its base up to its summit. And of that 56,000 feet, around 13,500 feet are above sea level, and the rest is below. Huge, and then it's very, very broad and wide. So it's a huge edifice.
Kilauea is Mauna Loa's younger, more volatile sister. Her name is Polynesian for spewing or spreading. And since 1983, Kilauea has spewed enough lava to cover the whole of Washington, D.C. to a depth of 44 feet.
When the lava first erupts, it has a temperature of around 1168, 1169 degrees C. As it's flowing down toward the ocean, it cools only about 0.6 to 0.8 degrees C per kilometer of travel. So after the lava has gotten to the ocean, it's still 1163, 1162 degrees C. It's awfully hot. That's more than 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. What happens when a lava flow moves across the countryside is that nothing really survives. It can move through a forest and burn through the forest and all the shrubs, and sometimes leaving lava trees or tree molds, the impressions of the trees, but then the lava travels on. It doesn't do that very rapidly, normally speaking, so people can usually get out of the way of it, except under certain circumstances. The lava crusts over quickly because it cools against the air. And so what people don't realize is that beneath their very feet when they're standing there, lava is flowing. So they're in a more exciting situation than they may realize, and perhaps than they feel comfortable in.
Thanks to Kilauea, Big Island has been getting bigger, and every day up to 4,000 people venture onto the hot stuff to witness the spectacle.
I thought it was fabulous. I mean, that is probably one of those once-in-a-lifetime kind of things that you ever get to see, and you end up having to go halfway across the world, but you know what? It was worth every minute of every mile.
You get to see, even in the cracks, you can almost see the lava, and you can feel it, and you can just feel the heat and just know that the lava is there and it's under your feet at that moment in time.
We would like to see real running lava flow. It's cool.
Park Ranger Travis HEGGIE was on duty the day the latest flow of lava broke cover.
You see flames coming up. It was burning all the grasses, and we noticed lava was flowing this way, that way, every direction. It really reminded me of a flood, just with slower moving lava. And so we got out of the car. We had to evacuate everything down here because we had visitors down here, cars parked down here, get them out of the area. You know, at the most I'd seen lava move maybe 100 meters an hour, but this is moving a good 200-300 meters an hour. It's spectacular. You're seeing the beginning and the end right there, the creation and the doomsday. You do have to realize, too, at the same time, you are coming to a volcano. It's not Yellowstone National Park where you can walk up to a geyser that's going off every 90 minutes or something like that. It is a volcano, and there's inherent risks that you're taking upon yourself, just even walking out on this terrain.
Unfortunately, we've had 4 deaths during this entire eruption, all of them taking place in the last 12 years, I guess, or so, from people who got too adventurous and went down onto the bench, which is the platform that's constructed as lava goes into the ocean. But otherwise, it's a thrill for them. I think they get to experience nature sort of in the raw, and I think it's really a very good thing.
The Hawaiian chain of islands has been created over 70 million years by an oceanic hotspot. A plume of heat rising from deep within the earth melts rock as it ascends. This molten lava continues upwards, eventually bursting through the Earth's crust, creating new land.
Right now we have 3 volcanoes that are situated around 25 or 30 kilometers apart from one another that are all being fed by the same hotspot. That's Mauna Loa, Kilauea, and Loihi, a submarine volcano off the south coast of Kilauea.
As the Earth's plates jostle for position, they move over this plume of heat. Like dragging a sheet slowly over a candle flame, the focus of the eruption changes, creating new volcanoes and new islands.
Kilauea now is directly above the hotspot or the plume, and so it's really very active now. And Loihi is just coming onto the hotspot, so it's small and growing, and its rate of activity will increase dramatically as it becomes more nearly directly above the hotspot. If it continues to erupt for another 50,000 or 100,000 years, we'll see a new island form.
On Big Island, this creation of land is rich in symbolism. The Hawaiian people believe that divine imagery and mystical meaning is to be found in the natural elements. Kikuhi and her foundation are responsible for keeping these ancient beliefs alive and passing them on to the next generation.
If you were to ask me who my God was, or if you were to ask me how many gods I have, I think my answer would be 40,000. And perhaps a more truthful answer might be 400,000. Because anything that produces energy, whether it's vegetable or mineral or elemental or animal, is to us a god.
And inside the crater of Kilauea lives the most powerful and fearsome deity of all, Pele, the goddess of fire. To the islanders, Pele reveals herself in every aspect of the volcano.
Pele is this earth, the rock. She's the sulfuric acid. She's the ash. She's the molten lava. She's all those things and more. Some refer to her as Kawahine o Kalua, woman of the pit. Kawahine Aila'au, the woman who eats forests. But her element is responsible for the creation of the land. And so to a culture of people who live in the middle of the ocean, land is the most important element. We owe our lives to this tiny piece of rock that we live on, which happens to be the byproduct of the creative spirit that Pele Honua Mea is.
I know the Hawaiians, you know, they really believe in her, but I kind of do too, you know, that she don't want all this, these tourists and everything.
Just wiped out the whole subdivision.
She's angry.
Yeah.
She's angry, yeah, she's very angry.
Big Island of Hawaii is a unique combination of delicate ecosystems and fearsome violence. This endless cycle of death and rebirth makes it a land of exotic and captivating contradictions. After the break, we explore the mightiest river in the world, the Amazon. A list of natural wonders would never be complete without arguably the greatest of them all, the Amazon. In fact, the Amazon could qualify twice, both as a river and a rainforest. It is the world's largest river system, stretching from its source in the Peruvian Andes over 4,000 miles to the Atlantic Ocean. It is also the biggest tropical rainforest in the world, covering 2.5 million square miles of Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. In the heart of the dense tropical rainforest lies the city of Manaus, the capital of the Amazon basin. It was built by the Portuguese in 1669 and continues to be the Amazon's trading center. By the late 19th century, this was Brazil's most prosperous city. Almost every pneumatic tire and Macintosh coat in the world was made with rubber from the Amazon basin. But with no roads leading into or out of the city, its survival was reliant upon one thing: the river. Today, this water highway is as vital to Manaus as it ever was. Although 1,000 miles inland, the river here is still over 300 feet deep. Even tankers can sail this far, exporting nuts, oil, and timber from the surrounding rainforest. Nine miles downriver from the frantic activity of Manaus is one of the most extraordinary natural phenomena, the meeting of two waters, the confluence of the Amazon, the brown water, and one of its tributaries, the black water of the third largest river in the world, the Negro. John Harwood is a scientist and tour guide who often travels the Amazon basin.
On our left is black water, that's the Negro coming down from the north, and on our right is the Amazon water coming down from Peru. In the Negro, what we see that black is the color of the water. It's a kind of tea made by dissolving leaves in water, just like you make tea. Whereas when you look into the Amazon, what you see is the color of the sediment. And there's enough current in the Amazon to keep the mud up and get that rich color of the cafe au lait of the Amazon. Basically, what's going to happen is the Amazon is going to push the Negro over to the left bank, and as the Negro gets thinner, it'll get faster. As it gets faster, it gets the energy to hold the sediment in suspension, and it picks up the cafe au lait color, the creamy color.
The Amazon has over 1,000 tributaries feeding into it. The entire river system is the size of North America.
When you look at the two rivers on a map, you see that the Amazon looks about as big as the Negro. However, the map doesn't show you the current, which is the volume of water coming down. The Negro is worth something more than one Mississippi in the amount of water, and the Amazon at this point has something like 6 Mississippis worth of water coming down.
By the time the mighty river meets the Atlantic, it will be 200 miles wide and discharge 45 million gallons of water a second into the ocean. The Amazon basin contains 15,000 known animal species. One of the most extraordinary river creatures is the Amazonian manatee. This gentle giant can grow up to 9 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds. but the manatee is under threat of extinction. Its flesh is a delicacy, and it's easy prey to local fishermen. At the National Research Institute for Amazonia, scientists nurse manatees that have been injured or orphaned back to health.
The manatee meat, it's very well appreciated by the locals, so usually they kill the mother, they kept the calf for a certain time, and when they see that the animal it's almost dying, then they call us. So usually our animals here arrive in a very bad condition, and then we need to rehabilitate the animal until they get strong again and well enough to be put in the nature again.
Não ter nenhum problema com infecção, né?
Numbers of manatees in the Amazon are dwindling. The animal takes years to reach sexual maturity, and reproduction can be as slow as one calf every 3 to 4 years. After months of nursing these extraordinary creatures back to health, the Institute will release them into protected waters. When we return, we go hunting for alligators. As we travel up the mighty Amazon River, we begin to enter the heart of the jungle. And it's at night that this mysterious world comes alive. Tropical rainforests are the most varied plant and animal habitats on the planet, and the Amazon is the oldest and largest of them all. The basin receives 7.5 feet of rain every year. It is hot and humid, a giant greenhouse in which plant and animal life thrives in exuberant abundance. Tropical rainforests cover a fraction of the Earth's land mass, yet in them live 90% of all species of primate, 80% of all known insects, and 60% of our plants. For early explorers, the Amazon was an impenetrable swamp where danger lurked at every river bend. The jungle harbored not only disease, but some of the most fearsome animals in the world. The river teems with great schools of piranha. This infamous fish, however, is much maligned, and there are no verified reports of humans dying from a piranha feeding frenzy. More often than not, piranha are used as bait to attract far greater dangers. The Amazonian alligator. But these days, it's all to please the tourist. The Amazon jungle is one of the most popular destinations for intrepid travelers who stay at jungle lodges, such as Eco Park.
Well, here we are on our way to Eco Park. Eco Park is set on the Tarumã, which is a tributary of the Negro itself. It's a remarkable place, Eco Park, because they had the philosophy of combining a love for the forest with a love for animals too. And they have a rehabilitation center where animals taken from the illegal pet trade are released back into nature. Eco Park is part of the current boom in Amazonian tourism. Besides the animal activity, of course, what you want to see when you come to the Amazon is forest.
The Amazon has over 3,000 types of indigenous tree. Compare that to the 700 species found in North America. The forest takes on many forms. Some of the most dense vegetation grows on the riverbanks and in the swamps, while the hardwood trees thrive on the higher and drier ground. The average life of these trees is 250 years. But despite a worldwide interest in the protection of the Amazonian rainforest, it is disappearing fast. The jungle is being destroyed at a rate of 11 football fields every minute of every day. The clearing of forest for agriculture and the felling of trees for timber means that this exotic and beautiful land that has existed since the age of the dinosaurs could be consigned to the pages of history. Next up, we follow the daredevils over Niagara Falls. These are the turbulent waters of the Niagara Strait. As the water descends downstream, it gathers pace, ending in one of Mother Nature's most extravagant shows of force. The Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls is not the largest waterfall in the world, but it's certainly one of the most dramatic, certainly one of the most visited, certainly one that's most accessible. So that's the big thing here. You can get to this falls, and you can get right to the edge of the falls, and you can get to it very easily.
The Niagara Falls straddle the border between the United States and Canada, halfway between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. This vast cataract is a giant natural plug hole, the drainage point for 264,000 square miles of fresh water.
The waters of the Niagara River that eventually go over the falls come from 4 Great Lakes, and they're shared Great Lakes, and they are all coming from runoff water. There's no great Nile that's feeding it. It's all runoff water into these 4 Great Lakes, and they continue down the Niagara River over the falls, and then continue again down the river to Lake Ontario to the Atlantic Ocean.
37 million gallons of water plunge nearly 200 feet over these falls every minute. It's a spectacle that's as entrancing as it is powerful, and it attracts 15 million visitors every year.
Well, the waters of the Niagara River and the falls themselves are very soothing. Even people that visited here in years past, many of them wrote about the soothing effect of the water. It's a place you can come and think. It's a place you can sit and see a beautiful sight, and of course then that translates into the mind, and it's a place that I like to come to often. I'm a Niagara watcher.
I think it's a religious experience. I think God knew what he was doing. It's fabulous.
It's just huge. It's just, nothing else compares to it.
No, I think it's the first time I've seen something like this.
I have seen Taj Mahal in India, and I mean, you cannot compare two things, but you know, both of them are like really beautiful. But of course, that's a man-made wonder. This is a natural wonder. So I would, you know, natural wonder. This would be #1, definitely.
1/5 of the world's freshwater supply travels down this corridor and over the falls. It's a river that produces 4.4 million kilowatts of power. It's a river that supplies all kinds of drinking water and water for use in industrial plants. So it's quite a river.
The waters plunge over two very different falls. On the Canadian side are the Horseshoe Falls, so called because of their distinctive curve, while over the border lie the American Falls.
The Canadian Horseshoe Falls is about 170 feet high from the crest line to the river, and from the river to the bottom of the river, it's about 170 feet deep. The American Falls, the Bridal Veil Falls, is not quite as high from the crest line to the rocks below. It's about 135 feet. 90% of the water goes over the Canadian Horseshoe Falls because the falls leans towards the Canadian side. 10% of the water goes over the American Falls.
Today, Niagara Falls is dubbed the honeymoon capital of the world. In its time, the Great Cataract has lured everyone from Marilyn Monroe to Winston Churchill.
People have always been fascinated with Niagara. It goes back to the early years when the honeymoon started, basically in the 1920s, even earlier, some people might say. But the attraction is the water, the draw. When you're near water, you can't help but feel good. Negative ions make you feel good. Negative ions are things that you experience when you walk in the light rain, you go to the beach. When you go near Niagara, you can't help but be happy. So this is the place to come on the honey lunacy, the honeymoon, Niagara Falls.
Part of the allure of Niagara is the overwhelming power of the water, and risking life and limb by riding the falls has attracted daredevils for over a century. 21 have attempted to survive the drop, 5 died, 6 were stopped in the act, and 10 lived to tell the tale.
Since 1901, people have been going over the falls intentionally in barrels and water jets and skis, and the first person to go over was a lady by the name of Annie Taylor, a school teacher from Michigan. She went over successfully, and then after she went over, she said, nobody shouldn't do that anymore. But people have done it since then. Since the mid-1950s, after a fellow by the name of Red Hill Jr. went over the falls in a contraption called the Thing and lost his life, there's been a bylaw that says you cannot do this stunting without the permission of the Parks Commission. And the Parks Commission, to my knowledge, hasn't given any permission to anybody to go over the falls since then.
Anyone considering the stunt today should include a checkbook in their preparation. The fine, if you survive, is $10,000. Niagara has had a long association with stuntmen, daredevils, and entertainers. In the 19th century, it attracted some of the greatest tightrope walkers the world has ever seen. To the amazement of the crowds, they crossed the Niagara Gorge, pushing wheelbarrows and carrying washing machines. One even took his manager. Following in their tentative footsteps is Jay Cochran. But Cochran has an even higher ambition: to be the first funambulist to walk over the falls themselves.
Well, the walk will be the longest it's ever been done by anyone, and the highest, and the longest over Niagara. It'll be a distance of 3,560 feet, more than 500 feet above the water. People say, oh, you must be fearless, you must not be afraid up there. Absolutely, I'm afraid up there. If you don't have a fear, you're going to get careless. If the situation is ever to such a point that you have to have a second thought about it, don't do it.
This time, Cochrane is walking over the town of Niagara to convince the authorities to grant him permission to attempt the ultimate skywalk and claim his place in the history of Niagara Falls.
There is no one alive today on the planet who can actually stand in front of you and say, I saw the last man who walked across Niagara. Wouldn't it be neat one more time to repeat history, and for another 100 years, people could actually say, I saw the man who walked across Niagara.
But despite the stunts and the showmanship, nothing can upstage the extraordinary beauty of this natural phenomenon. Coming up, we experience the planet's greatest marine adventure. Stretching more than 1,250 miles in a graceful crescent along Australia's northeast coastline lies a broad necklace of coral known as the Great Barrier Reef. It spreads over 135,000 square miles, an area larger than Italy. The GBR, as it's known locally, is the world's single largest coral habitat, a huge colony of marine creatures that have built, over thousands of years, a complex and beautiful citadel under the sea. This is the only living structure that can be seen from the moon. The Great Barrier Reef acts as a natural breakwater for the Australian mainland. It is in fact 2,900 individual reefs that have evolved over millennia on a broad, shallow continental shelf, the perfect pedestal for growth.
The highlight of the Great Barrier Reef is that it is ever-changing. There's always something new, something interesting, something different down there on every single dive. So no matter what the weather's doing, no matter how you're feeling that day, get under the water and everything's just amazing.
In 1981, the GBR was selected as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. It is the largest marine sanctuary in the world and home to a multitude of plant and animal life. 1,500 species of fish live here, 350 types of coral, and 6 varieties of sea turtle. It is a diver's paradise. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, and the crew of the boat Diversity welcome a group of tourists on board. They're heading out onto the reef to experience the most exciting marine park on the planet.
Tonight we're going to travel up the inside of the Great Barrier Reef out to a place called Osprey Reef. Osprey Reef is very spectacular because basically we have 50 metres visibility all year round, and it is a very isolated area and not a lot of people get out to that area.
By dawn the following morning, the Diversity arrives at Osprey Reef, and after a light breakfast, the team is ready to start the dive.
Okay guys, first dive of the trip, welcome up to Osprey. Right in front of the reef flat we have a wall which drops away down to about 40 metres. We have our sandy bottom, beautiful big Gorgonians down there. We've set a maximum depth of about 35 metres for this dive. Treaty will be diving with you on it and hopefully we'll get a few sharks here.
The world of the reef suddenly unfolds before the divers and reveals a docile potato cod, a white-tipped shark, a spiraling shoal of barracuda, and a graceful manta ray.
Lots of sharks. It's the best diving I've done. I've dived Malaysia, South Africa, and so far it's the best diving I've done. It's brilliant.
Loads and loads and loads of sharks. It's excellent. I would do it again tomorrow and the next day.
My role on this boat is to firstly educate people and also show people how amazing the Great Barrier Reef is. After every dive, we usually sit down and we go through the fish books and the identification books, so we could always talk about what we've just seen and any little interesting facts about, you know, the fish that we are seeing, from, you know, the invertebrates right up to the sharks. The reaction from novice divers and also from experienced divers is just one of amazement. A lot of people come out here and don't expect to see so many corals, so many beautiful fish.
Coral is made up of millions of soft-bodied invertebrate animals called polyps. These polyps have a symbiotic relationship with algae known as zooxanthellae. By converting sunlight and the polyp's waste products, this algae provides oxygen and food for its host.
A coral is a simple animal. It's made up of a coral polyp. Within the little coral polyp lives a unicellular organism called zooxanthellae, and that actually produces sugars by photosynthesis that provides the little coral polyp with nutrients to grow. Also, a byproduct of that is calcium carbonate. The little polyp uses the calcium carbonate to secrete and make a base for itself, and then it keeps on secreting, so it makes a base on top of a base, and then that allows it to grow, and then they just build up, build up, build up.
And over time, these corals form intricate and beautiful living reefs. After the break, you're invited to dinner with the sharks. Today, the Great Barrier Reef is explored by 2 million tourists every year. But diving on the reef is not without its dangers.
The safest way of diving is in a group. We buddy everyone up, so everyone dives in a pair. Even the most experienced divers don't dive alone. They know it's not safe. But if anything does go wrong, you've got no one there to turn to, and if you're down pretty deep, it's a long way to the top. Yeah, some of the dangers down there with touching corals is obviously some of them can sting you. We have fire corals and stinging hydroids. There are certain types of shells which have a cone shell which is poisonous and can kill you, and has done so in a couple of instances. So it's just a lot safer to keep your hands to yourself, swim around nice and casually.
The highlight of the dive is ringing the dinner bell for the sharks.
I think most people get the biggest buzz out of a shark feed that we do, where we drop about 20 kilos of tuna heads down in about 15 metres and have around about 40 white tips and grey reef whalers just feasting on these tuna heads, and we're only about 10 metres away from them. You can hear it and you can see it and feel it, all the adrenaline rushing.
Nobody's been bitten yet, but we try to do it very safely when we feed our sharks here. Everybody's at a safe distance, and you don't get to see things like that all over the place.
Well, the Barrier Reef is pretty famous for being, one of the best places to dive in the world, and that's one of the main reasons we came. And it's pretty met all our expectations.
I would say more than. I mean, I never expected to see so much. We've dived before in other places, and it's never been as good as this.
On the final day of the trip, the team is ready for the grand finale, the night dive.
This is my first night dive, so I'm a little nervous. How do you see the sharks at night?
We do ask you to stay off the coral as much as possible. We prefer people not to take any corals home to show mum, etc. There's a bit of a hefty fine for that one, particularly at the Barrier Reef because it is a marine park. We're really down there as observers, and we ask you to leave only bubbles behind.
The planet is rich with natural wonders, and today they are almost all within easy reach. Our challenge is to cherish and protect these extraordinary and beautiful sights so that they too can be enjoyed by generations to come.